Hi everyone, so what we're going to be talking about today is starting our new unit about life in the ocean. So far in our class we've talked about different marine environments, we've talked about the water itself, plate tectonics which change how the ocean look, and now we're finally going to talk about all these different animals within the ocean. So to start doing that, we need to talk about how these animals are classified. So when we classify animals, what we're doing is help identifying the relationships between these organisms. So what I like to call that is evolutionary differences. So these evolutionary differences are really what help us classify these organisms, because when we take a look at those, we're going to see that these evolutionary differences are going to see what stems from how we classify these organisms. So again, if we think all the way back to how we're going to be classifying these organisms, we all stem from one common ancestor. And through the millions and millions of years that life has been on the earth, we have evolved and changed. So this classification really allows scientists to clearly identify key characteristics of each organism. So depending on maybe genetics or morphology, how those animals look, we're going to help classify those organisms. And it's also going to help us avoid confusion with common names. So an example of that is our whale shark compared to maybe a blue whale. Our whale shark is not a whale, it's actually a shark. So that can be pretty confusing because of how those animals look and how that happens. But because of specific key characteristics of the whale shark, such as having gills instead of lungs, we're able to identify those organisms and classify them a little bit easier. So let's take a look at these different levels of classification. So we start at domain, which is the most general. And we're moving down all the way to species, which is the most specific. So as we move through these different classification levels, we're going to see the big differences between those animals. So our domain starts very, very general. There's only 3 categories within our domain. Then we move into kingdom, which only has 6 different categories within those 3 domains. And then as we go down and down, we see that there's more and more categories that happen here until we get to genus and species specifically. So a good acronym to remember these is darn kids prefer candy over fresh green spinach. And the words that we're comparing with those is domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. The 2 that we're going to talk about most specifically is genus and species, because that is how different organisms are actually named. They're named by their genus and their species. So how we would write those in a situation is we would either italicize or underline these words. So each time we're putting a name, say we're thinking of a cat, we would put its genus, which is feline, and its species, which is catus. So the first letter of our genus is going to be capitalized, and then we're going to have a lowercase species. So genus, species, either underlined. Remember, first word is capitalized, our second word is not. So let's take a look at some examples here. So our example, we have 34 different species of reef sharks, but they are all in one singular genus right here. So when we're talking about different species of reef sharks, we're going to include the genus, which we know with our genus name, we know that it's going to be a type of reef shark. And then our species name is going to give us the specific shark that we're talking about. So for each one, we see that we have our genus capitalized, and then we have our species not capitalized, but it defines each type of shark. So here we can see this is the species for the bull shark, This is the species for the Caribbean shark. And then this is the species for the gray reef shark. But we know, since they all have the same genus, that they are very similar in our phylogenetic tree, or in our classifications. They're all different types of reef sharks. So that's going to be really important when we start talking about specific animals, is that we characterize them by both their genus and species name. So let's take a look at our 3 domains and our 6 kingdoms. So our 3 domains here are going to be archaea, bacteria, and eukarya. And within each of those categories, we have different kingdoms. Eukarya is definitely going to be the one that we talk about the most, mostly because it does have the most different kingdoms, and it also holds most of the different and familiar organisms on our planet. So our familiar organisms are our Protista, our Plantae, which is plants, fungi, and Animalia, which is animals. But within our archaea, we can see Archaeobacteria and Eubacteria. So let's start talking about some of these different domains. So in our archaea domain, we can see that it's mostly made up of prokaryotic bacteria. And what prokaryotic means, remember, is single-celled without a nucleus. So these single-celled organisms that do not have a nucleus, that are bacteria, are able to live in really extreme environments. And that's what's going to classify them as archaea rather than bacteria. So some of places that you might find these might be hydrothermal vents, high salinity pools, so really high salt dissolved salts, really acidic environments, sulfur pools, and close to volcanoes. And it's important to note that these are some of the oldest forms of life. So it's very possible that we have all evolved from some sort of archaea in the past. So remember, really extreme environments, single-celled without a nucleus, prokaryotic bacteria. And here are some examples of the places that you might find them. So here we can see our hydrothermal vents. We should be really familiar with this. We've talked about this extensively. We can also see some of our high salinity pools over here, and our really warm, hot sulfur baths. These are just some areas that we're going to find our Archaeobacteria, our prokaryotic single-celled bacteria without a nucleus. Our next domain is going to be bacteria, and again, we're going to see these are composed of prokaryotic bacteria, again, single-celled organisms without a nucleus. And these are also going to live everywhere, but one really important one that we're going to talk about is this cyanobacteria. And it's really important in our oceans because these types of bacteria are able to photosynthesize. So yes, we are taking that energy from the sun, but no, they are not plants. They are bacteria. Sometimes they're commonly known as blue-green algae. But the funny part about that is that they are not algae, and they are not all blue-green. Some types of cyanobacteria are red, and these red are usually fed on by flamingos, and it gives them that pink color. So that's kind of a fun fact here. But let's take a look at these. So our bacteria here, our cyanobacteria, really specifically in this picture, you can see how it has those that green color because of that photosynthesis, and it's allowing to create a lot of food resources for a lot of animals here as well. This picture, you can see some of our red giving those flamingos those pink colors, but remember that this single cell right here is that bacteria reproducing and coming together. So that's where we're going to stop for today. If you have any questions, please let me know.